Welcome back. Thank you for staying with KTN Prime. We continue with our discussion right here in studio, centered on the state of education in the country. Are we at crossroads when it comes to education? Grade 9 transition is in the offing, and a couple of teething challenges, even though the ministry says 2,500 classes are what's pending. So will they finish them in time in order to ensure that no child is left behind? We continue with our deliberations right here in studio. Allow me to reintroduce my guest in case you're just joining us. I'm joined in studio by Dr. Tom Kuja, who's an educationist and researcher. I'm joined by Rose Eteye, who's the CEO of the Kenya Private Schools Association, and Dr. Julius Otundo, who's the head of department at the education faculty at Riara University. Thanks for your time. Let's continue. And I had hinted that we'd talk about capitation. I'd like us to delve deeper into this, because some schools out here entirely rely on capitation to fund their operations. And according to the education CS Ogamba, he said primary and secondary schools would receive 50% of the second-term capitation this month. Is timely dispensation of capitation funds a mirage? What's the net effect on the ground when it comes to the schools that heavily rely on capitation to run their day-to-day operations? We'll start with you, Dr. Ari, on the far side. Yeah.
I think with the issue of capitation, the breakdown of 50, 30, and 20 is right. Mm-hmm. It is just the issue of timing. And possibly the time the funds are released is where we have a challenge. But I also get to understand possibly it could be because of checks and balances.
Okay.
I think the biggest problem we have in education that must be sorted out is real-time data. And once real-time data lacks, then we face this problem. So it is not just from the ministry point of it, but it is from the ground point of it of how do we effect data in terms of even transfers? For example, what happens if we have given a school A this amount of money based on these numbers, and when the term starts, 200 of them have transferred? What happens with that? So the issue of checks and balances is critical. I think the issues of real-time data is very important, possibly whether it's an app that could be created for schools so that we have real-time data, so that when schools open like this, in the first week you're able to report that these are the numbers that I have. Because I feel the government, where you release this kind of funds and these children have transferred, that already is a problem, because that means that the money then goes into a wrong school as opposed to going to the right school.
I get you. Rose, as you come in, there's a time the private schools were pushing to be included in this capitation issue. How far has that gone? What's your status? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that question. Maybe I will first look at, when you're looking at the African agenda, the Africa that we want. On the education tenets, one of the issue is to ensure that there's equal access to education. And we're looking at, as private schools, there is no private child or a public child. Every child belongs to the government. This you can bet, you can agree with me. So what we're saying is we may not be able to get what the government is getting in terms of capitation, but is it possible that the Kenyan child in the private sector can also be provided with this capitation so that to ensure efficient learning for all our learners? Just like I had begun this conversation, is not every child, our schools are in different levels. We have, I can call them tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3. Some of them are truly struggling to ensure that they meet some of these requirements for quality education. Okay. Is it possible that the government, as a request, that can also consider the children in the private sector?
But bearing in mind our fiscal...
A big question to that one.
Yeah.
Will then the private schools be willing to operate open book accounts? Because that's the big question. How will the government audit if they were given this capitation? That actually must be the biggest question so far, because being that I run a private school, that's my private entity. So how will I be compelled to audit my books of accounts just because I have been funded? Maybe it is something that may not be answered now, something to be thought about.
Yeah, but Rose, kindly respond. What do you think about that?
I don't think private schools should have a problem with being audited on their accounts. Because anyway, we are doing a business. This is a business. We do audits every day, every year. So I don't think as private schools we have a problem with that. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Dr. Ari, briefly on this issue of capitation, how do we get it right here?
All right. Now, you see, every year the government spends close to 650 billion shillings for the purposes of capitation in our education sector. Now, you see, I know according to UNESCO, the bare minimum or to fund basic education, probably, they look at around 6%. But in Kenya to date, we are doing around 27-28%. So for me, there's a huge chunk of money that the government has set aside to fund education. And I'll agree with that again, what he has said. You know, the question is accountability of these particular resources. So that particular delay in restraint is to some extent based on how do these particular monies that we send, how are they accounted for? Okay? How are they accounted for? That is very, very much important. Now, if the monies are there, then they should be released on time. So again, it's a question of timing, all right? We were having a discussion with my sister here in the waiting room there before we came. And, you know, she was saying that even this child that studies in a private school is a Kenyan asset, all right? And therefore, the government should not even shy away from funding these particular students in private institution. Yes. So long as Dr. Tunda said, they are able to open their accounts for auditing purposes. No, so me, the question is about when is the money supposed to be disbursed? We are in January. If you ask me, then I would recommend that before the start of a term, for example, January, can these particular monies be disbursed towards the end of December or towards the end of January, towards the end of December, so that the head teachers of the school managers can now start the process of planning, procurement, and so on and so forth. Because if the money is not there, then there are certain things that will not work.
But that seems to be an ideal situation. The realistic situation on the ground, we well know of our fiscal position, the delays that come with it. I mean, when's the last time that capitation was released on time?
Yes, well, you know, these are proposals, Jesse.
Okay.
Yeah, these are proposals, okay?
All right. Yes. Yeah, no problem, understandable. And we wish we had government representatives
if
right
I may
here.
ask,
Yes.
like the issue of course, Article 53, Section A and B of the Constitution is very clear that the government should provide free and compulsory basic education for all. And that includes children in private schools. But the biggest question, if you go to Article 57 of the Basic Education Act, talks about when I take my child to a private school is by choice as a parent. So parents have a choice to make. So if you have made that choice, what happens now with Article 53? A story for another day.
Tafakari ya babu, eh? Anyway, let's talk about the CBC book shortage. And just today, the Kenya Publishers Association had a couple of sentiments to the parents and guardians who are a little bit worried in terms of not being able to access the books. They say the books are there, but according to the parents, they're having a hard time, especially parents who have learners in private institutions. Let's listen in.
Institutions do not benefit from the free books from government. Only public institutions do. So, for these public schools, they are supposed to buy these books from bookshops. And again, as a council of the Kenya Publishers Association, we can confirm that these grade 9 textbooks are available in bookshops.
This is the fourth bookshop I have come to. I was looking for books for grade 2 and PP2. So a list of 7 books, I've only found 3. Others, I'm told they're out of stock and that we have to wait or we keep checking. So I'm going to the next bookshop now.
So it has been chaotic, hectic, push, tukingangana kutafuta vitabu, but hope tutapata finally. Because they are telling me come the following day.
Missing 3 books from the list that the teachers gave me. Yeah, so I've been looking for those books, especially since after Christmas.
Okay, so who's fooling who? That's a big question. Rose, what's your experience, especially with parents who have learners in private institutions? Are these books easily accessible?
I'll tell you that this board has prepared us as a nation, just like we said. The issue of textbooks should not even be arising in the first place. When we were sure that grade 9, for example, will be happening in 2025, these books should have been ready in the previous year. When I was talking to one of the teachers or head teachers in a public school, they hinted to me that for them, they received these books for the other grades in 2022. So they're just expecting that some of the other rationalized areas should now be ready.
Okay.
But for the public school, for the private school, we have had an issue because the government, I think, deployed these books in December to their specific public schools. But private schools, the publishers have not yet printed all the books for access to all the private schools for access. Yeah. So yes, as private schools, we're still having a big challenge in accessing these books. We do appreciate that the government has already printed out all the learning areas for grade 9, but you still have a problem with the grade 5 and grade 6, which I believe that there is no book that is yet out yet. So they're still using the old textbooks and getting innovative ways of learning. So we're hoping that the government will be able to do something and ensure that our partner KICD will be able to do something and ensure that these books are out.
Okay, according to KICD, they say they're reviewing some grade 5 to 8 textbooks, and Kenya Publishers Association says those books will be available by the end of January or early February. Briefly, Daktaris, whichever way, how do we sort this book issue? Because,
yes,
I mean...
So that is, I don't know who to believe, but I would want to believe, I want to believe the parents.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I've seen parents report that they have been able to find a couple of books.
Okay.
So it's just a simple comment or a simple advice that the publishers that are in charge kindly produce enough books for our learners. Learning has already started. Going up to February will be disgraceful to our learners. Let the books be available on time and let the learning process start. As simple as that.
As simple as that.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Zikami, give us your take on CBC book shortage.
Innovatively, you see for public schools being funded, and basically they will go for one textbook, not a variety. What I would wish to hear from parents, is it a variety or they're just missing a single main textbook? That's one. But for private schools, I think innovatively, I would suggest they could go the digital way, because the digital space has all these books. Okay. And then instead of rushing for the books that are in short supply, they go for workbooks. And what happens, the CEO, for example, you have a direct conversation with the publishers. Because what I'm looking at here, publishers are more concerned with the public schools as opposed to private. And so private, you come in as a second thought. So to bridge that gap, I think the private sector now needs to have a direct partnership and collaboration. With the publishers. Not at school level, but at the KIPSA level. So it is the KIPSA working with them directly, and then, of course, going the digital way is also another better way, so that the students can only work with workbooks. But that is my expectation for many of our private schools, as opposed to rushing for these books at long. But also, let me say this. If you gave me a CBC class lesson now in mathematics, in a subject, we now have AI. Teachers just need to be trained on how to use AI and still get the same results without waiting for a textbook.
Okay.
And also it's a challenge to our teachers.
All right.
They should also become authors so that they work directly with publishers and say, this is my book. And of course, if I'm coming from this school, I need my school to get the books. But let them also explore the use of AI in creating content for learning.
Rose, I have to ask you this, because there was a race for schools to comply, where earlier 348 schools had initially failed in a safety audit that was carried out recently by the Education Ministry, which is bent on ensuring all the flagged issues are addressed around safety. Are there any issues arising from the reassessment by the ministry? Have you had any of your members complaining?
Maybe first of all, I wish to make a clarity on that issue.
Yeah.
When I was having a conversation with my friend Daktari here, he actually had a notion, and I'm sure this notion is out in the public, that the 348 schools are all private schools. That is a wrong notion.
Okay.
It's a misconception. Actually, that's a combination of both private and public schools.
Okay.
So the issue that the ministry was trying to outline was not the issue of whether the school is private or public. It was an issue of the safety of the Kenyan child. And secondly, there's also a notion that the private schools, just because of that announcement, the private schools are no longer a safe haven for the children. That again, I wish to demystify and say that it is a wrong notion. Our schools are a safe space for every Kenyan child, that we should be able to embrace the private schools. I also want to appreciate the sub-county directors. During the holidays, and our directors, we worked tirelessly to ensure that every gap that was identified in those recommendations was closed down. So we have some schools, almost, I can say confidently, almost over 95% have now complied.
Okay.
And those that are yet to be cleared for it, maybe it's just about the financial aspect of some of the recommendations that need to be done, because they involve, it's capital, quite resource intensive, so it may take time for them to close on these gaps.
Right.
But as it is now, all, if not most of our schools have now complied, because just say, we realized some of the issues are raised. I will not wish to downplay any and say that they're not as important as the rest, but it's as installing a smoke detector or a CCTV camera, which I can confidently say that these were issues that were sorted out within the first hour.
Okay.
And another issue as I close, there's some parents who saw certain schools on that list and they were a bit scared. Does it mean that this school that I take my child is not safe? I want to let the public know that some of these schools on their own volition closed down the boarding section even before this announcement was done. So it's not an issue of whether these schools are safe or not. During the post-COVID effects, some schools sat down and said, we may not be able to proceed with the boarding facilities. Therefore, we think as a school we should close down the boarding section. So parents and the public need not to worry about admitting their children in private schools.
Okay, and Russia is one of those examples. They decided to close their boarding facility after that unfortunate happening last year. So we are strapped of time, and as we finalize, I'd like us to give the final comments, but equally, we have to factor in the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms, which was to review CBC and to address concerns of access, relevance, transition, equity, governance, finance, quality of education, among others. In terms of implementation, because we usually hear we're quite good on paper, but when it comes to implementing, that's where the rubber meets the road and there are issues that arise.
Yes.
As you give us your final comments, I'll start with you, Dr. Kuja. Talk to us about what this report entailed and how effective it was, and perhaps speak to some of the anticipation over the release of KCSE examination results.
Those are two questions in one.
Yeah, briefly, yes.
Now, first, even before I comment on what you've asked, probably just to comment on the issue of these particular schools that were closed down because of the failing to meet the safety protocol or safety standards. What I would say is this, is that, you know, these are schools in business, okay? And they are schools in business, and they are schools that have also employed people. There are families that are feeding because of these particular schools. So I would want to request, and Madam CEO is here, that those particular areas that were pinpointed by the Ministry of Education should be addressed by these particular schools, those small areas, and that there must be frequent visitations of these particular schools. There's a notion here, we are always reactionary to issues, all right? Because I was asking myself that if 348 schools have been closed, these particular schools have been working, all right? So why do you issue, why do you allow them to operate and then you close them down? So that should not be there. On the issue of
briefly,
the Presidential Working Party,
yes.
You know, this is a report that was done by very much qualified personalities, okay? And it was giving us certain recommendations with regard to implementation of CBC, right? Part of it that was administrative have been done. For example, domiciling grades 6, 7, and 8 in respective primary schools, and the head teacher being the overall manager of the institution, that has been done. Okay. But there are certain areas that we still need to improve. On the issues of KCSE examination results, I want to wish all the candidates well, don't be anxious. The results will be released, and then those who will pass, you will pass. Those will not get those particular grades that will take them to universities. Right. There are also TVETs and TCRUD institutions.
Okay, well,
thank you very much.
Rose, briefly give us your take and your final comments here.
Okay, thank you. Let me start from the end. That I want to wish our candidates all the best in the exams that are just about to be released by the government, which they will make us know when this should be out. Another thing is about the Presidential Working Party on the education reforms. The main agenda was to issue a guidance on how CBC should be implemented in the country. The biggest problem here, we should not even be discussing about from PP1 to grade 9. We should now be focusing on senior school, the pathways. What now happens? Does the public know the criteria to which the schools will use towards getting themselves into the pathways? Are we prepared as a nation to ensure that all children are placed in the right pathways? Okay. And is the public ready, especially in the industry marketplace, are they ready to take up the CBC child? Otherwise, I wish you all the best.
Asante. Dr. Otundo, briefly.
I think, one, I want to record that I'm very happy because CBC is succeeding. Very, very happy. In fact, it has moved the Kenya's years of schooling from a 7.8 to 8.7 as we speak, beating many countries. In fact, going above countries like South Africa and all that, which is good. Two, I want to commend the private schools for the work they are doing, and I want to ask the government to see private schools as partners. They are complementing the government.
Yes.
We currently have 8,000 plus, almost 9,000 schools. If they all close down today, I would tell you we'll have millions of students on the street because we do not have enough government schools to accommodate. So let them look at private schools as partners, work with them, involve them, engage private schools. After all, there is a lot of brain in the private sector that needs to be harnessed effectively. At university level, we are well prepared, very well prepared. Where I come, for example, like Riara University, we are the University of Teachers, extremely well prepared to ensure that we release the best teachers into the global world.
Well noted. You deserve a pat on the back. Asanteni sana for your time and your input. Definitely appreciated. We had two doctors in studio. Perhaps it's time you and I, Rose, think of advancing our studies.
You're welcome.
Of course.
So I was joined by Dr. Julius Otundo, who's the head of Department Education Faculty at Riara University, equally joined by Rose Ete, the CEO of Kenya Private Schools Association, and Dr. Tom Kuja, who's an educationist and researcher. We appreciate your input. That's how we wrap up tonight's edition of KTN Prime. So much to talk about in the education sector, so little time, so we've barely scratched the surface. But do stay with us as we continue highlighting the developments playing out in the education sector, including other areas. My name is Jesse Rogers. Have yourself a good night.